Hey guys, welcome back to the Midnight Mod Garage. On this episode, we are going to fix a coolant leak on the IS300. Eventually.
Now, the original intro for this episode went a whole lot different.
Yeah, in fact, Jay even went so far as to say
that this will be the quickest, easiest fix in automotive history. Now, anyone who's ever worked on cars knows that the use of a phrase like that makes your project doomed from the start. Let me explain. So this is the original radiator cap on the Mishimoto dual-core aluminum radiator. And what we figured was happening was the spring on this one, when compressed, these little locks on the sides weren't actually holding down to the teeth on the radiator and was able to spin in a full circle. So what we ended up doing was just getting a new radiator cap, deciding we were just turn it into a coolant flushing episode so it would have a little more substance, and that would be that. So we drained all the coolant out and filled it with distilled water and used the flushing additive, let the motor get hot, we drove it around for some time, and when we brought it back to the garage with the new cap on, realized that the flow we had, the leak that we had, was still at the same rate that it was before. So one of the first things we noticed is that one of the T-clamps that connects the radiator hose to the radiator is a little gangly and loose, and we're getting just a tiny bit of fluid from there, so we're going to try and tighten that up. Mike, it's still leaking. So the next thing we notice is that the drain plug on the radiator also looks like it may have a slow leak coming from there. So a little Teflon tape around the aluminum threads of that, and that should do it.
How about now?
It's still leaking. So at this point, we were just about out of ideas. We traced back where the drip was actually coming from, and we finally found that there is a little crack in the reservoir just on the side here. And if we press it closed, you can tell that there's coolant that comes out all over my fingers. And when it's hot, it leaks pretty viciously. Alright, so we're back in the shop. Thanks to the magic of editing, it has been a few days and our new radiator shroud has been delivered. And so we're about to do the only thing the internet loves more than a cat falling in the kitchen sink, and that is an unboxing. So, let's get into this. There's really nothing to be concerned about here, since you know that when you buy things off the internet, the packaging always comes nice and neat and never deformed or misshapen. The contents inside are never broken or destroyed. And the item that you get is always exactly as described by the seller, as well as the pictures depicted in the ad are always exactly what ends up in the mail. So let's take a look at what we got here. Alright, so the first thing that we need to note about this new radiator shroud is that the cap to the reservoir, let's see if we can yank that off, it doesn't have the nipple on it for the overflow line. And if we go over to the one that's installed still, it should look like that. As long as this one fits on that, we're still in good shape, but this is a little concerning. So an additional variance I just noticed from this generic fan shroud to the one that's still in the on the IS is that they have these little clips to route the overflow line that wants it to follow a path down this side on my left, and then here's the clip here where it will run it down and give it space to drip out. The one on the IS doesn't have a pathway for the hoses to go. In fact, that same clip to hold the line is over here on the right side. So I'd be very surprised if that makes any difference at all. It's just another difference I just noticed between this Toyota fan shroud and the one from Taiwan. Alright, so now that we've taken a close look at the new fan shroud and identified all the different variations with it that could be a problem, first thing we're going to do is get the fluid out of here. So let's drain the coolant and see what we can do. And we got 6 10mm bolts we got to take out. There's one here, 2 more over on this side, and there's 3 on the bottom. And then, but before we do that, of course, we're going to undo the plug and get this thing draining so we can get all the fluid out and take a look at what that looks like and then give it a flush. All right, so clearly this isn't the stock radiator. So the Mishimoto draining plug is an aluminum. It's right there, and it's actually a 3/4 inch socket. Get that off, let it start slow draining into our pan here. Then we'll take the radiator cap off, and then that will give it its airflow and allow it to drain at full speed. Oh shit. There we go. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these overflow hoses and remove the top radiator hose, and then we're going to go underneath and remove the bottom radiator hose so we have room to get the shroud out of here.
Permission to do that.
Just slap it.
Yeah. Question for you. What else you got going on? Oh, I need you to order one more thing. How many years you been doing that far that you are? You're talking like
You got it.
Okay.
There we go. Alright, so this is where we're at now. So the little nipple beside the radiator cap that attaches the hose for the overflow has, obviously it's not there anymore, it has snapped off. And then while removing the bit of radiator hose that connects the manifold or the engine block to the radiator where the temp gauge sits, those bits of silicone were held on by a bit of Gates Racing hose clamp that is the shrinkable kind that you can't reuse, you have to razor it off. So upon razoring it off, of course I went too deep, cut into the radiator hose itself, and now that needs to be replaced. This one's loose.
Yeah, put a little pressure on it.
Yeah. We discovered we have to take the radiator completely out in order to get the fan shroud out, which meant undoing the oil cooler lines, which we have here dribbling oil into the pan. And then lastly, I'm just about to undo the bottom radiator hose so that we can actually pull the radiator completely out of the car. Okay, radiator is out, which again we didn't plan on having to do. Plugs do look the same,
but the plugs are not the same. After bolting the fan shroud to the radiator and reinstalling it in the car, we quickly found out that the fans were not getting power. So we cannibalized the connectors from the stock fan shroud, hardwired them to the new fan shroud, and we had that problem solved.
So there's an aluminum stem that holds a silicone hose that connects the radiator to the overflow tank. That broke off.
And pause. So right about here is where we decide this episode's definitely going to need 2 parts. So we come in the next day, get out the tap and die kit, and decide we're going to fix a new fitting to the radiator for the overflow hose, and stumble upon numerous other issues that couldn't make it into the first shoot. So stay tuned for part 2.